May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Cuke Audio Podcast. I'm DC, Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, doing our bit to help preserve the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths cross his, and anything else that comes to mind. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable, free from economic hardship, and able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the limitations of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. So today we have a guest, one Kelly Chadwick. So Kelly is my son. He was born at Green Gulch Farm in 1973. And he's been going to Tassajara with a crew and doing tree trimming. He's got a business called Spirit Pruners in Spokane. It's a pretty large outfit. A few years back, he went on a little tree trimming vacation. And left Spokane, went down and did the Ashland Zen Center trees, and came down to, I don't know how many years ago this was. I'm not sure. Anyway, came down to the Sonoma County and did John Terrence. I think he did some for the Sawyers. Went down, did some trees at Jamesburg, and then went into Tassajara and did some. And was he alone? I can't remember. We talk about it in the podcast. Anyway, that began a regular summer thing. I think he was not alone on that trip. And that began a regular spring, like April, trip. Tassajara liked it so much. I mean, they just went down there and did it for free, but, it was worth a lot. And Tassajara needs to hire tree trimmers. So Tassajara offered to fly Kelly and his staff back. So he's been going back there in April, and they did a big trip this year. He talks about it. Anyway, that gives you an idea of that. He talks about it in this podcast, and he talks about Tassajara. Now, Kelly moved to Tassajara when he was 3 months old, and we lived there till he was about almost 2, and he was back a good deal, in the summers we'd go for 10 days and stuff like that, and he'd sit in his Zendo and work, and he loved it. So now he's been going back. And last year after he was there, we did a podcast. So this is our second podcast talk that is specifically about Tassajara and his experience there, this time and through the years. And, I hadn't thought about doing another one like that until and he came back, got hold of me and started telling me how he felt about it. I said, let's do another podcast. I want people to hear this. So that's enough. Let's take it away. Incidentally, I have a cold. And yesterday was a very unusual day for me. I was too tired to work. I did the email and went on Facebook and said happy birthday to some people. And I just lay down. And then I watched stuff, a series at daytime. It's just like daytime television, which I never do. But it was interesting. And, I was coughing some. And we have this great Chinese medicine. And I took a picture of it with ChatGPT. and it gave it a very good review. It said that was a traditional herbal medicine used for centuries, and it tests well in comparison to conventional cough syrups. Anyway, you must want to throw in that. Anyway, that was just a little report on my health and why my voice is like this. It's sort of fun. I really like it. I just did, I'm making an audiobook for the sequel to Tassajara's stories that's coming out in September, which goes through 1967. I now have gotten the book ready, the sequel, which is 68 through 71, and ends with Suzuki's, funeral and cremation. Whereas Crooked Cucumber ended with his death. But this takes it a little further, but it's not all about him at all. It's, about Tassajara and the guests and stories people tell and stuff outside of Tassajara, Anyway, I was recording that, and I've been recording that, and I recorded a chapter. Well, not a chapter. I recorded a piece today, and I really liked it, but it might be so different from my normal voice, too much like Larry King that I won't keep it. But anyway, we'll see. Anyway, let's go with this Zoom talk with Kelly Chadwick about his experience at Tassajara. There you are.
Yes, hi, Dad.
Oh, good. I hear you. Oh, that's a very nice visual.
Check it out. That's the Balinese sculpture I got.
Wow. That is great. So, what is the subject of this podcast talk, Kelly?
You're asking me. You're supposed to tell me.
I want to hear it from you.
Well, I just had another visit to Tassajara with my crew, and we had a remarkable time. It's become like a routine kind of, and Tassajara has expressed that they want to write us into the budget each year. There's a really nice synergy and relationship we have with them. They're very supportive, and they really give us a lot of room and trust. And so I guess just talking about that experience.
Good. Well, what sort of crew is this?
We're arborists.
Oh.
So we do tree work.
Yeah. Well, hey, give us a little bit of history. Tell us how this started. Well, aside from the fact that many, many years ago you were traveling with tree pruning equipment in your car.
Yeah, that was a time when I was beginning to exit a long-term relationship and kind of finding my way back into life. And I took a month-long trip down there and pruned. And the next year, Wakan, who works with us, and I spent some time there. And then we went down there a few times with our crew, but then COVID happened. And I think Tassajara was looking for someone more local that they could call when they needed it. But it's really hard to get people in there. And they'd flake out or they wouldn't respond. And we just found that it made sense for them to fly us down. It worked out in the budget there, to fly us down, rent a Suburban, and we go down there, we work for a week. So last year we were there for 5 days. This year we were gone for 9 days and spent 7 days there. So this is the second year in a row after COVID. There was a long delay, and we're going to be going back next year. And it's really, we can get so much done because we come down there with, 2-3 climbers, some ornamental pruners, and we're able to do an amount of work that is much more effective than the past, where it's been this hodgepodge of like, if somebody comes that happens to know tree work.
Right.
And
right.
We meditate and we work.
Yeah. And one thing I'd like to get out of the way here is the first time you went, you were going from Spokane where you live and where Spirit Pruners, the name of your business, is located. And you did the Ashland Zendo, as I remember, and
Yeah, we did Ken and Elizabeth
Sawyer.
Zendo.
And
Yeah.
I think you did some work over at John Terrence, too.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it was like four different Zen locations. We do that some here. We work with a Tibetan monastery here, and we work with a couple different kinds of Catholic institutions. But we love working in estates and communities and spiritual communities and places where there's a lot of intention with the grounds.
Mm, mm.
And
Now,
this definitely is the ultimate of that, is going to Tassajara.
yeah. Now, the first time you went there, you just went and did it, and you paid your travel, and it was all free. What's been the financial situation since then?
So the first two times it was all donation, and then the next time it was that, but they paid for our plane tickets. We decided it made sense to do that. And then the next time they gave us a little stipend. And then
Uh,
these last two times they've had a budget for us. And so, it's half of what we would normally make, but it feels really good because we feel honored and respected. We feel good about the work we put in, the value that Zen Center Tassajara is getting. And it allows people to be gone for that long from here and cover our expenses. And yeah, so it feels correct, I guess. I used to be too generous in my life, and I realized at one point that there's a lack of integrity. Like there's always what is most right. And I understand that truth isn't fixed, but one should always shoot for what is the truest, most correct expression experience in any given context, right? In any exchange. Ted says, my mom's husband says, it's some old quote, the only good deal is one where both parties leave feeling happy or something like that. And
let me make
so
a
I feel
comment
like,
here.
yeah,
Your grandfather, my father, told me and he was in real estate, he said the only good business deal is one where both parties profit.
perfect. Yes, unlike our executive branch's opinion currently. Um, but yeah, exactly. So I feel we're really there, and there's a great amount of respect. I mean, we feel so welcomed and so supported, but we've been there a few times now. They trust us. And so we make an enormous mess. We make a ton of noise. We ask for some pretty big adjustments, in terms of like believing a certain tree should come down that can be disruptive or concerning to people. So it's just, and once we get going, they require three people cleaning up behind us the entire time to be able to keep up with us, separate
Uh-huh.
from us.
Uh-huh.
And we could do that, but it would not be an efficient use of what we do,
Yeah.
And so it's a little embarrassing, kind of, like the disruptive nature of it. And this time they brought in a chipper for us. Which, they weigh like 7,000 pounds. And the plant manager, this woman, Amy Hutton, who is just really a great character and so just takes on that role of having to do everything, the plumbing and run everything that needs to be done there. She, her and I talked last year and we agreed it'd be good to try out a chipper. Leslie and Keith said that they've had them in the past, but she went in with I think it was an F350, like a 1 ton. And she brought that chipper in herself. Like we offered to pick it up, but she drove in and picked it. And that's a scary endeavor to drive a chipper down that road, 7,000 piece of equipment.
Yeah.
And then when we were there, we had to squeeze it down the road. It was really hard to navigate the truck and chipper, but it was so wonderful to have that there and be able to just chip things where we were. Turning it around on the far north side of Tassajara, past the student housing, was miraculous. We were able to do it. I had
North
to bring
side, I think of Up Creek and Down Creek.
I said north, but I meant east. It's just at the end of the student housing.
Yeah, east. That's Down Creek. Yeah.
We had to bring a skid steer in and move rocks around just to be able to jackknife it and turn it around. But um, that was huge. So yeah, it's like it's a major undertaking. And meanwhile, they're trying to close out work period.
Wait a minute.
Uh,
Tell me about turning it around again.
well, the truck has a full bed and an extended cab. So I mean, it's probably, I don't know, 20 feet or something, the length of the truck. And then the chipper with the tongue is probably, you know, 17 feet or something. I mean, it's approaching 40
Oh,
feet long with a thing. And there's no turnaround.
no.
And in their, in some person's virtuous desire to improve the, Tassajara, they put in a cute little garden in the middle of the open area down there by the mountain. So you can't turn around. It's like a little rock garden. And so we had to move rocks and then drive basically up the hill and then jackknife into the path to the Narrows, like the beginning of that path before you cross the creek.
No, what?
Um,
Jackknife?
Meaning just hard angles
Yeah.
with the piece of equipment. But we got it, and yeah. And then we had some big projects this year. One of them was we had the most intimidating removal of our entire career. There was a oak tree by cabin 15 and 16 that was massive. I mean, just enormous. The four branches of it, the four main stems were each the size of a tree. It took us 4 days to do it, and it was over two cabins, and it had two big cavities. So it was like a high candidate for hazard for destruction, and everything had to be lowered down. We had one guy that actually kind of injured himself doing it, just so much pressure on his body for a couple of days that he got this massive hemorrhoid and
Oh,
got
hard.
laid up and couldn't leave his bed and completely freaked out, thought his life was over. There was some nurses there that I had to bring nurses in and talk him down. He
Wait a
thought,
minute. Bring nurses in where? At what
to the cabin.
at
They were in,
Tassajara?
yeah, he
Now, wait a
couldn't
minute. You
move.
brought nurses in. Did you get them to come in from Monterey or something?
No, no, there was, of course, there was a couple nurses there.
Oh, all right.
And yeah, they talked him down, and then we just had to take care of him, bring him stuff. And, after 4 days or 3 days, he got, improved enough where he kind of helped us and he drove the skid steer and he helped guys in the trees. But it was a little traumatizing, but luckily we had another qualified person there. And we were able to finish it. What was awesome is we left the base of the tree, but naturalized the top. So we call it a wildlife tree. So there's two beautiful cavities in it. It's low enough where it'll last for a decade. And now like owls and, other cavity nesters can use this tree. Where we live here in Spokane, 40% of the wildlife spends some portion of its life in woody debris, standing trees or fallen trees with holes or clearing bark, everything from, amphibians to bats to birds, some and mammals. And so it's really important. And it's the biggest mistake that humans make in forests is not leaving large dead trees. So it was really fun to do that at Tassajara, and it adds a feature that's kind of new there. The other big project we were excited about is last year. I don't know if I mentioned this to you. Last year when we were driving out, I noticed something that I couldn't believe I had never seen, and I couldn't believe I hadn't heard anyone talk about, which is after you leave the gate, leaving Tassajara, and before you get to the
Reservoir?
yeah, the Waterhouse Reservoir thing, whatever you call that.
Yep.
There is a sycamore that grows over the road in the most gate-like way you can imagine. In this beautiful arching, it goes completely lateral. And so I was dying to honor it, not only in respect for the tree, but to me, it felt like a profound serendipity. And so I don't know quite the right word, but it's the spirit tree. It's the land spirit gate of Tassajara, clearly. And if you look at it, it's just so obvious that's what it is. And so that was one of the first things we did is we worked on it, cleaned it up, made some cuts to support its strength and beauty. And so that was really fulfilling, you know. And I love so they're mostly concerned about hazard, but they let us do all the ornamental trees and take on a couple projects like that as well.
What did they think about? I mean, was this communicated to people at Tassajara, the Spirit Gate tree? I can see it because you've sent me a picture of it.
Yeah, I mean, I've told everyone I talk to because I want it to be a thing, you know. And we have a spreadsheet we share with Tassajara that has, you know, budget, future projects, hazards, resources. It's this whole shared document, and it's on there.
Yeah.
So there's a record.
Yeah.
But I counted at the end because I keep a spreadsheet of like what we've done. So Tassajara has a record. And if I remember correctly, we removed, this is mainly hazards, but also some dead trees and stuff, 16 trees. We pruned, or maybe it was 15 trees. We pruned 66 trees.
Wow.
There, while we were there. And we bolted two trees that weren't secure enough in very important locations that needed to be preserved, but were inevitably going to fall apart. And we were able to put these huge bolts in it. So we got a lot done.
Now, I think some people hearing that you took down 15 trees at Tassajara might think, oh, that's terrible. How many trees are there at Tassajara?
Right.
I mean, are there 20 trees?
Right. No, good point. It's a good point. I mean, there are thousands of trees, and but it is something that we're sensitive to because people want to make sure you're not indiscriminately taking down trees.
Right.
The first time Wakan and I were there was an ash tree in the middle of the courtyard that was really in decline, and it was obvious it was just too compacted there. Plus, they don't irrigate most of their trees. The trees have to survive from spring to fall.
Yeah.
And it was obvious it needed to come down, but we had like a protest, like a mini protest. The director, which was Carolyn at the time, gave us the go-ahead after she talked to whoever, the board or whatever. But there was like a group of monks around us that were,
wow,
clearly agitated and making it known that they were against it and making comments. Like it was like this, resistive kind of thing.
Well, what happened?
Like grassroots resistance to the project.
And
it came down, and of course, no one notices and even remembers it was there now because we covered it up. But
this is, you just summarized what I've seen my whole life. Grassroots resistance, everybody being excited, doing things, and then, progress, mowing them down and whatever they wanted.
Well, it's an interesting balance. I mean, this is something we deal with a lot as a tree company is there's the backlash from humans dominating and destroying the earth in a really insensitive, disrespectful way. And so if people aren't informed, it's understandable that they'd have that knee-jerk reaction, no judgment intended, of, wanting to save every tree. And people get really sentimental about every tree and feel it's a tragedy if you cut any tree, but that's not how trees are. They're ecosystems and they're forests and they're collectives. And I believe, and I will even use the word no from my experiences, that trees don't experience reality that way. And the important thing is respect, It's like meat. What's important, I mean, vegans may not agree with this, understandably, but what's important is respect, right? That you're respecting the animal. And I learned that at Tassajara. I mean, I grew up being taught to thank the animals, to acknowledge the plants when you're picking a plant, to ask it, to thank it. I actually had an experience once, and I apologize if this is too random and trippy, but I'm going to say it because it's relevant. I was hiking in Montana with somebody, and I was showing them all of these different edible plants and mushrooms. And I found this one plant I just love. And I was so excited. I picked it out of the ground to show them how you could eat the leaf and the root and how beautiful it was. And immediately I felt ashamed and realized I hadn't I hadn't honored the plant and hadn't asked for it. I hadn't expressed any respect, which is what I grew up being taught. And I think it's a very important part of the experience of growing up around Zen Center and Buddhism, in at least the context I learned it in. And so I said, wait, hold on. And I spoke to the plant. I apologized and I asked it. And I don't expect anyone to believe this, but in my hand, it turned into a little fairy, like the spirit of the plant. I couldn't even see the plant anymore. And it looked at me with a soft smile as it died in my hand and relinquished its body. I had always spoken to plants this way because I was trained with that and I believed it in an abstract sense. But after that experience, I 100% in my being know with conviction the importance of it. And I always do it now.
And that's good. That's good. That's really good. Yeah, that's really good. And now, that's really impressive that you said you were taught that. Other people your age who are at the same place, or maybe at your other people who grew up around this, they might say, what do you mean you were taught that? I wasn't taught that. I think you picked up on it, where some other people not have. I mean, I would think some people would pick up on that to a different degree, let's say that. And some people, people are so different the way we take things in. And anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, you know one thing about that I feel like there was a cult at my experience at Zen Center, and in not just Zen Center, but the larger community of Zen and of seekers and of all of that milieu that was happening back then and still is that it cultivated a reverence for mysticism. And it's something I didn't think about when I was younger, and even later, I don't think it was intentional in terms of children, but a man who is part of the Tibetan monastery up here said to me the other night at dinner, he said, Buddhism is the one large religion that hasn't marginalized mysticism and that has embraced the mystics and the esoteric elements of the institution, whereas most other large groups that have a spiritual religion orientation tend to persecute at some point or marginalize the mystics. And I'm curious what your opinion is about that, but I feel like that is definitely part of it. And so one does expand themselves naturally in that way, I think, if you are around that culture. So that's a statement, but I also am curious what you think about that, about if that you think that's true about Buddhism.
That's very interesting. Well, I feel I just have a subjective point of view. I don't have a good overall picture of it. Like when I think of Christianity, and I put this on, I've done podcasts just about this, that, all this anti-God, anti-religion stuff, I understand it, but it's just so focusing on this narrow fundamentalist, or I don't like to use fundamentalist because it's not fundamental, it's superficialist. It's just focusing on the literalists. So the literalists are dominant now, but that's not what religion is. That's not what Christianity is to me, because I was raised on a Christianity where God did not stand for a being, just like in mystical Catholicism, and I'm aware of it somewhat. I don't study it deeply. I just read the stuff and I go, yeah, that's right.
But that's a perfect example, because you came from that Christian Scientist background, and that is completely not taken seriously by the larger Christian community. Yeah,
but my father rejected Christian Science too. It's just that general. He went back to it when he was dying, but basically it was what I call New Thought Christianity, and that's not my term. There were a number of people, Ernest Holmes, who founded Church of Religious Science, Is that what it's called? Yeah. Mary Baker Eddy, certainly in Christian Science. There was Emmett Fox went around. No, is it Emmett Fox? Anyway, it was a big deal in the early 19th century, early 20th century in America. But Jesus was like an enlightened person, and God stood for, something cosmic, not was very health oriented, very healing oriented. But the healing wasn't like what we think of with healing. What gets the media's attention. It was through, in who my father was into most of the time until toward the very end. Mr. Walter was that illness comes from erring thought. It's all mind produced. Everything's mind produced. It's mind only. Anyway, so I see Christianity that way. The problem to me with it was it didn't have the emphasis on practice, meditation. It does actually. In what I heard, in our home, if you look at the monastic traditions in Catholicism, and somewhat in the other Christian too, you'll see that there is meditation. Yes, go on.
One lifestyle that I think you could call practice that isn't seen that way, that is common with the Christians I know, is the lack of is the lack of using of substances, including social media, like the whole don't follow false idols and that sort of thing. But they do live that. And when you're not drinking and you're not smoking weed and you're not involved in stimulus-based activities like video games or pornography, that is a practice.
Yeah.
Is part of life.
Yeah. I agree. Well, that whole discussion could be endless. I want to go back to your take on Tassajara, because you've talked about the trees, and I think this is our second video on this. Your first one, you talked about realizing that Tassajara had a spirit, and one thing you talked about to me when you came back this time. The thing about Tassajara having a spirit and that whole thing, that's great. And you could get into it again. But your main point when you came back this time was how much you respected the community and the practice. Actually, you said that last time, and your feeling about the whole place. And there's that, and there's also you talked to your fellow workers about their take on it. Actually, your employees.
Right. Yeah, though we don't really, we kind of, I don't consider them employees. They're like people, we work together kind of thing. But
right.
Yeah, we were all taken by the quality of the community this time. I mean, there were some tangible differences. The food was the best it's been since we've been there. And they grabbed this nice young woman, SJ, who was the gardener, and thrust her into the kitchen, I think partly against her will, but she accepted it. And it's really intense, like she couldn't even really speak to us this time. But she did an amazing job. And they had a guy from Green Gulch, I'm having trouble remembering his name. It's something Mountain, I think, but he in Japanese, but he's a baker and
Oh.
really devoted to the craft. And so they had bread again, and it was incredible. So
What do you mean they have
one,
bread again?
they didn't have bread the last couple times. They've been running on fumes, and I mean, that's the thing is it's hard to find people who want to be monks now, you know. And so that was one of what the food was kind of back to itself. But the main thing was they're like mission driven in a way that I just haven't experienced before because they're like warriors. I mean, they've had to survive. Not only are they doing practice period, which is just I can't even imagine that would be so challenging. It's
Yeah,
not
the
something I
practice
could.
periods are much more intense now. I think I haven't done them, than what we used to. Well, it was fucking intense what we used to do, but it gets more. They have more zazen and more study and more of that, which Suzuki Roshi really, to him, he was satisfied with 2 zazens in the morning and 2 at night. And then we'd have one in the middle of the day too and work.
I mean, not even that though. Like that is just an incredible amount of zazen. You know, the arduousness of that is, I think, remarkable these days, in particular when we have so many other opportunities. But they come out of that and they go into this freaking work period where, they're understaffed and they have this little window to get a bunch of stuff done. And the majority of people there are, for one, there seems to be a lot of continuity. We're seeing a lot of the same people, and they're just, like I said, they're warriors. I mean, they are getting it done. It's a little bit like someone in a war zone. I mean, there is an undercurrent of stress that you can feel because it's more limited and there's fewer people. But they're just effective, thoughtful people, and there's this gravitas to just like the whole place because of it. And we felt that and appreciated it. And then the intention of all the people coming for work periods, some of who've been coming longer than I've been alive, and then new people. It's an amazing experience.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah. Ted Howell,
Yeah.
I communicate with him a lot, and he's there with his big beard.
I said to Ted when I was there, I said, "What's your gnome name?" Because he's just like a gnome,
Uh-huh.
And he smelled and he said, I think you're supposed to tell me. So I thought about it while I was there hiking, and I decided it was mugwort.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Incidentally, I was at Johanneshof, Richard Baker's place in the Black Forest for him stepping down and Nicole Baden becoming the abbot of Dharma Sangha, Germany and America. And Ted came, and he was doing fine. He was coming with his wife, April, and they went to Vanya's place over in Switzerland, which you'd love to see too. And they were getting around. They were doing stuff. So he wasn't. He was pretty spry. The one who was really spry was Hoitsu Suzuki. That guy. I mean, he can jump up a little and click his heels. He could. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but I'm so impressed with him. Anyway, back to Tassajara, and I liked your some who were who were there before I was born. Yeah, there's a few of us left.
I did talk to my staff after we came back, and one thing that surprised me was that there's this term integration in the community of, breath work and weekend workshops and psychedelics. And it's just the idea that you can have your epiphany and then you're going to return to baseline, and you have to figure out how to integrate it, right?
Fundamental in Suzuki's teaching too. Oh, in a lot of monastic teaching, Meister Eckhart. I've seen that as what I think that's perennial philosophy. I mean, the stuff I really dig in a lot of traditions. Meister Eckhart said, I tell the monks, don't just meditate all day, get up and do things. I don't know quite how he said it, but I've seen a lot of that. So go on.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I think that's something that I've gotten from you is the idea of enlightenment being like a location you visit, maybe, or something. But I see it over and over again because I am around people who do a lot of entheogenic work, and I get asked sometimes to sit with people that are there. And, I sent one of my employees to an ayahuasca retreat. And when they came back, they were like, "Oh my God, I finally understand. I found myself." And they're like, is this how it's going to be now? And I'm like, nope. In 3 months, you'll be exactly back to where you were in 3 months. So just try to, somehow capsulize whatever you can. But my point is,
Wait a minute.
yes,
You can't say enlightenment is a place where you visit.
why not?
It's not a place. It's not anything.
Oh, I disagree. What I mean by that is I feel like all consciousness is a location. And the more powerful or different an experience is, the further the location is from what we normally experience. And
Yeah.
there's examples. You go to an incredible art experience, or you start riding horses, and you're going to experience something that you didn't know you could experience. There's a point where some sources say you actually leave this where we are here. So I think like as a consciousness as a location. So when you have those moments where you feel more tapped in, or you have insight, or you feel enlightened or connected, I do consider it like a location that you're visiting.
Yeah. All right. Well, but that's not. I'm in terms of Zen's Buddhist enlightenment. I think it's better not to use the word. You can't say
Okay.
anything about it. So we're using the word enlightenment in a more relative sense.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
I withdraw that statement.
But go on. I hope I didn't take you too far off your train of
No,
thought.
no, I was talking about integration, and something that was so surprising to me when I got back is everybody required integration. The experience is so profound of going from, quote, the matrix of just the daily grind and how intense it is on our nervous systems, and how so much of it is like this maladapted construct in our society that isn't ideal for what our being is. And to go into Tassajara, where you're in this incredibly conscious, beautiful ecosystem in the momentum of a Zen practice that's been there for 70 whatever years, and in this really safe place with other people that are dropping into the experience. It's so profoundly nurturing of your nervous system that when you return, it's like a little bit whiplash. And so some of us struggled, and I did last time, but I didn't think about it. But this time, we all struggled somewhat. People made some big changes in their lives in positive ways, but it's an adjustment. Dario said, so one thing, when I went down
Dario
there,
was there. Wow.
Dario, well, my mom too. So my mom.
All right. Well, I just want to say who Dario is. Dario is the son of a woman you were with for many years. And
I kind of raised him. I'm a parent to him.
yeah. And also, Renee, your partner then, said she had Dario because of something I said.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Daya, your mom, Daya Goslag, who many Zinnis know, wanted me to meet her guru, her teacher, Renee. And we met in the fly bottle, in the Wittgenstein's fly bottle, in that little alcove room at Green's. And, we ate and we had wine and talked and everything. And at some point, Renee said, world's so screwed up, she didn't want to bring any more beings into it or anything. And I said, oh, yeah. So you're going to leave that to, I don't know, I said something pejorative about other people, Like I told you, you're named Kelly. One of the interpretations of the name Kelly is warrior. And I told you when you were a little kid, I said, Kelly, this world, it's destroying, the human race is destroying itself. We have threats of nuclear war. You grew up around a lot of me talking like that, and I said, but you came here to be a warrior for that. So I gave that sort of spiel to Renee. You're going to have a kid who's going to help make things better. Anyway, at some point later, she mentioned that to me.
Well, he has. He is someone who has a huge impact, and he is a warrior. He's a radical person in how he shows up in the world. And I had always talked about Tassajara, and he's a really good pruner too. He's been working with me for 12 years since I started.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he works with us 2 days a week, and he was my first groundie, the first person to help me.
Wow.
Yeah, it's his only job. He's an artist. He doesn't work basically. I mean, he's a hard worker, but not like a job. He doesn't require basically money at all. And so he for years, he would only work 1 day a week. And now he works 2. But yeah, he was there. And then my mom was there, which was great because her husband couldn't come down. So she flew down with us, drove in with us, was really sweet. And but Dario was saying to me, he was talking about how moving the experience of being at Tassajara. He dove in completely. He was meditating both periods. He was going to all the services. He loved it. And he equated it to go to Burning Man.
That's
because
that's really, that's seeing something in common there that I think most people would not see.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, he said on paper, of course, there couldn't be more different, but he said the positive shock to the system of being in something that is so radically different than what we know and how transformative that is, he saw them as equals. And that was an interesting conversation too we had as a group, is like the relevancy of the monastery and of Zen in general, because it's easy to go there and feel like, man, if they added some melody to the chants, or if they had a little more pageantry, wore more colorful clothes, if there was dances, like this could be an amazing thing, right? And we all can go to like all the things you could turn it into, especially if there's a perception of it being antiquated. But there was this consensus among us that Dario said, and Ben, who works for me, he was there last year, Ben, that it wouldn't work, that there's something about the rituals and the like the reverence of the moments of that practice and of the structure and form, that without it wouldn't work,
Mm-hmm.
that it adds, Ben used the word edges, that there has to be these edges to something to confine it, to create a vessel of practice, right? And like, it doesn't really matter what that is, but Zen, which has been an effective vessel for carrying this methodology of waking up, and you can still feel it. And so both of them were like, we want to say all these things that we could want to do here if we were here, to make it really amazing and really magical and bring it up to the current timing.
Right.
And both of them were just like, you would lose the essential thing. It's like this paradox.
Yeah, that's I think a really good point. Suzuki used to talk about how we limit ourselves in order to have freedom, and and Baker, Richard Baker used to say that, I think he said that about Japan once. I remember long ago. He said in Japan they don't have as much physical freedom as we do, but they have more mental freedom.
Right.
I don't know if that's true. I mean, but we could apply something like that to Zen practice, at least for some period. That's another thing. It's not the intention of a place like Tassajara isn't to be a place for people to live all their lives. It gives people an opportunity to have that experience for, a day, a week, a month, a year, 5 years, whatever.
Here's a question that riffs off that a little bit that we talked about, and I'm curious your take, is the necessity or non-necessity of a charismatic leader, right? Because there were people that gave talks there and they were good, but it's not driven by a charismatic leader. And humans often don't do well in institutions if there's not some dominant person that's either inspiring or powerful, and I'm curious, like our takeaway was we felt it would do better with a charismatic leader if there was someone there, but that, it seems to endure without it. What's your opinion about this?
Once there was a woman that was being an au pair for Graham and Hideko Pechi, and it was too hard on her. And I helped her escape it for a while. I just said, hey, come on, you got to get out of here. You're going to go crazy. And I drove her around. I drove her in and introduced her to people and took her back. She gave her a day off. One thing we did was stop by Peter and Wendy's, and she talked to Peter. And she said, oh, David has shown me some stuff about Zen and Green Gulch Farm. And do you have any advice on that? And he said, yes, beware of teachers.
Uh-huh.
I liked that. That was good. So we have to beware. But I don't know, there's different phases that, or there's different possibilities. You're only going to get the ideal leader occasionally, or the charismatic leader. You're not going to get it all the time. You're not going to have. In fact, yeah, I mean, if there's people who study the dynamics of institutions and stuff, I think one thing that is very, very common, and I've certainly noticed it, is that there will be a charismatic founder, either who dies like Suzuki and then it transforms. Well, so many different ways it can go, but you get your charismatic leader like Richard Baker that at some point the institution spits out. And what David Katz said about Sim Vandren, who founded the Fairlawns Institute, when Fairlawns got rid of Sim, he said he got founder's disease.
Right.
Anyway, it's rather normal for an institution to move the founder out in order for it to grow more.
Yeah, but the thing about that is that you lose a quality of inspiration then. So if you don't have people who are, inspiring and eloquent and embodied or whatever the thing is, then when people come and visit, they have to find that in the practice and the experience, right?
Yeah, well, look, I've interviewed endless numbers of people, and I have emails and information from endless numbers of others, and there's a lot of people who have found that many of the priests at Zen Center very inspiring.
Cool.
And I go, oh, really? Because, they're my peers. Your peers don't tend to think of that way. But, oh, yeah, there's a lot of people teaching Zen and Vipassana. And the Tibetan thing tends to rely so heavily on Tibetans. But there are non-Tibetans people who found inspiring. But I don't know. You've got to be able to practice without the inspiring teacher.
Well, and that was the atmosphere there. There really was a tribal quality that
Yeah,
was inspiring, and with the group of people that were there and the
yeah.
devotion. Somebody that
Benjamin Franklin did not want a president. The model that they were using was some Indian tribe. Do you remember which one?
I think it was the Iroquois.
That's what I was thinking in my mind, but I didn't say it. There was a lot of the foundation of the American system was on how the Iroquois did it, and they did not have a chief. They did not have, well, maybe they had a chief, but it might have been a rotating thing, which is the abbots in some Catholic monasteries. Well, sometimes they'll rotate Father Prior, the head guy. But anyway.
Yeah, well, and I could be wrong about the Iroquois thing, but that's just what popped in my
Well,
head.
that's what popped into my mind too. I didn't say it because I went, is it Iroquois?
Yeah, you got to be
Where were they?"
careful.
Right. Anyway,
we-
but people were so king oriented. They didn't want a king,
Oh yeah.
but they thought we got to have one person. So I think I might be wrong, but this is very memory from way back. So I'm just grabbing shards of a broken pot. But I think it was Benjamin Franklin who wanted the turkey to be the national bird, not the aggressive eagle. And I think he didn't want a president, but somebody didn't. Some people didn't want there to be a president. You can have a problem with the president who has too much power.
Right. Yes, indeed. But humans also don't tend to do well, the ones I have been around, without hierarchy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Since I've been around consensus-based stuff, and I don't have the patience for it.
Oh, Jared Diamond, Guns, Germs, and Steel and Collapse, and has spent so much time in New Guinea, right here in the Indonesian archipelago. Boy, a long way away and very different from here. From what I hear, Katrinka's gone there a couple of times. No, she's gone there once and she's going back to snorkel, where it's supposed to be absolutely great. But anyway, what Jared Diamond said is that he thought the people in New Guinea were the smartest people in the world. He just thinks they're
Wow.
great. But he said it is maddening, and he said they run by consensus. It is maddening to sit with them and wait for them to come to some conclusion. But he also said and they're very tribe-oriented, he said if two men met walking somewhere, and the first thing they do is decide what their relationship was. Who do they know? And if they don't have any good relationship, he said they'll try to kill each other. So it was a dangerous place.
Yeah, we sure have a different relationship with death than we used to. My friend Hazen, who has had two National Geographic survival shows, spent a lot of time with tribes. He talks about how they don't really worry about their well-being so much because they tend to live, like 30 or maybe 40 years. And so when you go hunt, they're just running through the jungle with, bare feet, getting lacerated. They might have a broken finger, and they're not even aware of it. They just don't even care. They just throw themselves in. There's not this desire or expectation to preserve your life.
Life and limb. There's life and limb.
Right.
Like the broken finger. Just the thought of that, I think I'd be tiptoeing in going, oh, my God, I've got to have my Zoris on at least. Well, so let's see, where were we?
Well, going back to charismatic people, there are all these OG people, right, that have been coming and know the place. But one person who I think is quite notable, and maybe everybody knows about her, and I just didn't, but definitely somebody that is charismatic and deeply knowledgeable and an important character there is Diane Renshaw. Do you know Diane Renshaw?
Mm-hmm.
She's a botanist, right? She's a
Mm-hmm.
botanist. She's been going there forever. I mean, decades. I mean, it sounds like she's been there also since before I was born.
Yeah.
And someone with, I have a lot of reverence for her because her knowledge is so deep, and um, she has that perspective, that way of communicating that really good scientists have, that is absolute allegiance to the scientific process, like won't make statements if they
Mm-hmm.
don't know it's true, but also deeply informed. And so we went on a hike with her, um,
Oh.
and got to, observe plants and flowers and ask endless questions. And she also knows a fair amount about the cultural history there.
Boy, does she.
Yeah.
She has Tassajara tales. And it's done a tremendous amount of, in a sense of archiving and reporting on the geography, on the botany and everything. And also, in terms of work on that, David Rogers, and they have done some stuff together online and for Zen Center. And I talked to her about doing a podcast. Thanks for reminding me. I'm going to get hold of her
You
right away.
definitely should have her on.
Yeah.
And her story of how she got there is interesting because it was her husband who was really into Zen. I can't remember. I think he was a teacher. He ended up I think, working for Microsoft for a while, making some money, and then went back to teaching or whatever it was. But she just did it like as a gift. Like she heard about Tassajara and she thought, oh, this would be great for my husband. And she got him there kind of as like a gift. And then he eventually passed away, and she's continued that relationship.
Mm. Mm.
S-
Mm.
Speaking of the,
Oh, wait. I want to say one
yeah,
thing. Wait a minute. I thought, what was it? I wanted to say, oh, God. You were talking about charismatic. Oh,
well, while you're
yes. All
thinking,
right. No, charismatic leader. I want to say this. I am not at all from the school that just puts down Richard Baker in a knee-jerk way. I mean, they're, they're, I gave a talk at Greens once for their to all their friends of Zen Center and donors, and I started it off by saying, and this when was this? This was 2000, around 2000. I said something that we should all remember, that none of us would be here now if it weren't for Richard Baker.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
that's the point I made in Germany. In his when he's stepping down, I was the first speaker. I made a terrible mistake. I don't think about it, but I have essential tremors, which
Mm-hmm.
normally you don't notice much. My hands will shake a little bit. It depends on what position they're in. And one thing I can't do is hold a mic. My hand starts moving around like I'm like really spastic, and I forget about it. I don't even know it's happening. And so the whole time I'm doing that. But anyway, I made that same point of how many people in your life would you say you wouldn't be here if it weren't for them?
That's actually, I heard a whole talk on this. Venerable Chodron, who's I think pretty known, respected teacher in the Tibetan tradition and is the abbot here in the place up north of here. I heard a talk from her years ago where that was her whole point about parents. And she's like, if you are resenting your parents, go home. Just drop it, because you being a parent's hard, but I don't care what they did, you wouldn't be here, and you should only be grateful.
Yeah. Well, that's very Chinese. That's very Asian point of view. The idea It's normal in America for children to be very critical of their parents, and that I just noticed. I haven't talked to people about it, but I've just noticed in Asian countries I've been in, I don't think that occurs to people. I mean, they might be critical of their parents for different things. I do know. I mean, Suzuki's kids were very critical of him, but there also it rests in a fundamental gratitude. Anyway, interesting topic.
Well, and
I wanted to say one more thing. I wanted to make just an example. When Blanche had to leave the building to die, she wanted to die in the building. They just couldn't handle it. It was too much. And Elizabeth Sawyer said to me, if Dick had been Abbott, she would have stayed. So, with a strong, charismatic leader, or with a strong leader like that, I mean, if he said, what? I don't care how much trouble it is, a
perfect. It's funny. A funny thing happened when we were at Tassajara that I had this similar thought, which was, during work meeting, a family showed up at Tassajara that had just seen, Tassajara hot springs on the map, and had driven to go to the hot springs. And I guess this happens not too infrequently,
right?
And it was kind of like a yokel-y kind of family, kind of country bumpkin-y kind of feel. And it was like a father, the wife, and 3 kids. And they were really upset. They felt wronged. And they also seemed kind of a little off-put and kind of weirded out by what they were seeing. This, people in a circle, and some of them had shaved heads, and they were kind of they were on guard, but they also really felt offended. And the work leader,
why were they offended? What offended them?
Because they felt entitled to be able to go to the hot springs, and they'd driven all the way into Tassajara.
I would have let them go in the hot springs.
That's my point. That's where I'm going with this. Is I don't know why somebody didn't just say, you know what, that's not what this is for, but of course we'd be happy to have it for a couple hours, and someone will escort you over there.
Yeah.
And then they can. So I felt that was like that when I wasn't there. I heard this afterwards. That was my day off, but I was saddened. And I feel like, to your point, if you have a strong leader who it doesn't feel like constricted by the rules, that's the problem with rules, is they're to keep people who aren't informed or don't have confidence or courage doing relatively the right thing, but they're always imprecise. And so in this case, I agree. It would have been good to have a strong person that could have done that.
When Jerry Brown came into Tassajara in 1975, when I was director, he and Jacques Barzaghi, and they each had a date. I mean, probably they're sort of like their partners. Well, Jacques might have come in with Connie, his wife. I can't remember if they were married yet. But, I just became aware there were some people up on the road, and somebody was telling them, no, we're closed, you can't be here. And they were kicking them out. And, Jacques would say, this is Jerry Brown, the governor-elect of California. And I went over there, and I just said, oh, I'll take care of this, And I showed him around, gave him a cabin, the baths, and I let Dick know right away. I sent somebody to the office to tell him, or I had somebody taking care of them, and I did that. Showed him all around, and but all right, that's one thing. If these exceptional sort of things, right? That's easy to make that, but there were times when we would have so many people trying to get in, we had to put a limit on it. And then we had to get stricter. But generally, people would come, like somebody comes up to the gate, even when we have the limit and something, he just says, oh, this is the only time in my life, so it depends on who's there. That's all. It just depends on who's
Yeah.
talking to them. There's going to be somebody, oh, yeah, go on in. All right, you don't have money, that's all right. But there's people, that are more hard asses. And there's always a mix, and you sort of need the mix.
Yeah. Yeah. That is so true. And it is kind of fate how it plays out. There was someone there that told me that not too long ago there was a group of bicyclists that came in on accident.
Yeah.
That they were like taking some trip to, going down the coast, and someone read the map wrong and thought that they could get through and took it was like some whole group of people on bicycles that took them all the way in, convinced that they'd be able to continue, and they had to bicycle all the way out.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's good exercise. Incidentally, I wasn't always the good guy. I can remember one time, I could not. I was trying to get rid of this guy. I was trying to come in during practice period. I'd said he could walk through. He could go to the Narrows. He wanted more, so I had Katagiri talk to him. And when he left, he said, "Well, I met somebody who was compassionate here, not like that asshole I met when I first came in." If you don't want people to say you're an uptight bureaucrat, don't become a bureaucrat. You know what I mean? You got to, you'll have bad days, or you got to make decisions that are unpopular or something. Anyway.
Well, and there's also just chemistry. We show up differently with different people.
Uh-huh. So, have you made the points you wanted to make about Tassajara?
There is one point that I still want to make, which is the library is such a beautiful little gem.
Oh,
at
wonderful.
Tassajara.
Wonderful. Where is it now? Oh,
it's the same
it's
place.
the room where we lived.
Yeah. Yeah, there by the Zendo. And when I was a kid, my richest time of reading was being at Tassajara, because I'd go hide out in there and read like Louis L'Amour westerns and whatever, and just lose myself up there. And it was such a beautiful spot. And every day in my life, I take a 15-minute nap. It's necessary for my survival. And so a couple times at Tassajara, I didn't always take naps there, but I would run off like when I could, at, 2. I'd run into the library, run up into the loft, and pass out for 15 minutes and then go back to work.
Yeah.
But Dario and Ben both had these experiences. They were just in awe. They went to the library. They couldn't believe how charming it was. But then they lost themselves and got stuck there for hours. They couldn't fall asleep. Separately, unrelated, finding these books that both of them found books that they had heard of. Like there's this person named Carl Fredrickson or something that Ben thinks is like this, one of the great sources of wisdom in the world. And there's this book he's never been able to find. And he found it in there and read it. And Dario found a book called something like Intuitive Awareness that you can't actually buy. You have to like order it from some sort of intentional community, and thought it was some of the most profound wisdom he's ever read. And both of them were just blown away by the collection of books in there. And I think that that gets forgotten. It's just been cultivated over so many years, and people who are seekers finding texts that they think are important, and making sure they're in the library.
That's interesting. But that is a wonderful cabin. That was Paul and Ruthie Disco's, and he put he elevated it. It was not 2 stories. He elevated it, put in. Is there a stained glass window? But anyway, he put in the peaked roof thing with the window there and the loft. That loft is where Dia and I slept. You always slept. I made pot. There was a potting shed in front. I turned it into a room in '74 where when Dia and I were there with you. We went there. You were 3 months old, and
I never made that connection that I slept there as a child, and then I read and slept and rested there when I was older, and now I was taking naps there. It's just a good place for that.
Yeah,
for rest.
And we let you sleep out there cold. I mean, this whole thing about keeping kids warm, it'd be cold as hell. I mean, and you'd be out there. I mean, it was part of it wasn't like you were in a separate building, but it was a room. It didn't have a door or anything, but it was this potting shed. And I fixed the walls up some, but it still had wind coming through, air coming through it to a certain extent, and you would just be all bundled up there and sleep. So that's really good to sleep in the cold, to be well covered and sleep in the cold. And we had a stove in there, an iron cast iron stove in there. That's probably not there now. I don't remember that. But
I think there is.
is it still there? No. All right. And I think, she would probably remember better than me. I think our feeling might have been you'd learn not to touch it, but did I put a fence around it, because there was also the thought you could accidentally fall over on it and, burn yourself. Anyway, I can tell you one thing where you really, really learned what hot meant. Because we'd say hot, but it hadn't really sunk in yet. There was a pot of hot water that, we'd frequently have. We were always having tea of different types, including non-caffeinated teas. And so all we'd have to do is put the pot on top of the stove, like in the colder months, and it'd heat the water, the cast iron stove. And then we'd put the pot down on the floor sometimes and sit around. And at one point, you pulled it over on yourself. So all this, it wasn't boiling anymore or anything, but all this super hot water hit you. And I went, hot. And after that, you really knew what hot meant. And then you might remember this story. One day in the spring, just outside of there, is the garden and all these flowers. There was this beautiful butterfly landed on a flower, and you were there. You're like 1 year old or something. We're like maybe you're more like 6, 7 months older. I don't know. A year later, I don't know. Anyway, you're very young. So let's say more like 7 months old, 8 months old. But you were standing, and this happened then. Anyway, I don't know. You were old enough to stand. You were standing, and you saw the flower, and then you started to grab it. And I could see, that there was one instant with a chance to save that butterfly's life. And I said, hot. And you jerked your hand back.
And that's funny. Yeah, well, what I think of when you talk about the hot water pouring out is that it's a metaphor that we so often have to learn things the hard way in life. Like, we know so much. We in our brains, people tell us, and often you have to do it the hard way, and then you know it.
Yeah.
Yeah. On a completely different topic, one complaint I have that I feel a little remiss saying this because, I have only gratitude for Tassajara and for the administration and for how we're treated. But this is a pet peeve of mine. And maybe I am ill-informed as to why, but the COVID standards there.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I find that so irritating because, like, one thing that was stated well is, it's a monastery. We're not near, immediate medical help. If something happened, it's like, that's ridiculous. You're like 2 hours. It's not like someone's going to fall over dead from COVID in, 2 hours.
Hour and a half.
So, hour and a half, yeah. And I just feel, here's my real issue. It's not the inconvenience of having to take the test and bring them with us, right? I associate with fear consciousness. And I feel like there's a lack of expansiveness that is not consistent with consciousness that it encourages. And I think it's detrimental to Tassajara, to its overall atmosphere, to people's perception of it, to the experience of it, to have those arbitrary, fearful rules. And you can't control it, like everyone's going to get exposed at some point. So I have an issue with that, and I hope they change it.
Yeah. Zen Center tends to be like really heavy into like health and safety stuff. That can happen in institutions where you have a group of people there that are in charge of the rules, and they get together to make another rule, right? That's sort of, that happened in Buddha's time. It was one of the stories that, when he's getting toward his final days, he said, we got too many rules. We should just go back to the basics. So, but what happened?
It's like reverse pack mentality. It's like the same thing, but instead of being harmful, it's about safety. But you get into a group like you're saying, and there's this congratulatory feedback loop of someone wanting to say something helpful. So they suggest a rule and people agree. I have it in meetings at my company. Like the last meeting we had, someone was suggesting that we call an ambulance the second anyone gets hurt, no matter what it is, just to be safe. And then people are like agreeing. It's like this psychosis of being overly cautionary.
Yeah, indeed. And and Zen Center's super wokeness and everything is, I've asked a lot of people about in podcasts. Sometimes I think, well, I'm glad I live here. a lot of this stuff. Oh, and your thing about that's so amazing to me. You had COVID restrictions. I know people get it in America. I hear it every once in a while. I don't know when the last time I heard somebody here getting it, but in Germany, when I was there last September, I was there a month. At one point, there were 5 people in the building who had COVID, and they had no restrictions at all. Nobody was worried about it. They just let them have COVID, and it didn't spread much. You had 5, so it obviously spread some, but it was that really struck me.
Wow.
There was nothing in the kitchen, nothing. There was no jaga, jarak. I'm thinking of the Indonesian word for it. Distancing. Keep your distance. There was none of that. There were no washing or anything. One thing in the statistics of COVID, if you compare the sort of the Republican and the Democratic sides, they turned the response to COVID into this political thing, which it didn't need to be. So you tended to have your Democratic areas reacting very strongly, and your Republican areas not. But it's funny because Trump was pushing that, not a big deal. But he and Melania did everything that they thought more like the, they got vaccine before anybody else could. But all right. But what happened was the statistics show in all the distancing and masking and everything, not much difference at all between the Republican and Democratic areas. But once the vaccine came in, the death rate and the serious disease rate was much, much heavier in the Republican areas. Many times more deaths and serious illness. So the vaccine worked, but the distancing and the masking didn't.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was so interesting to me at Johanneshof. And there was one person from Zen Center who was going to stay there, and she left. And I was looking forward to spending some time with her. And it didn't occur to me for a few days, oh, I bet I know why she left. There's all these people here with COVID. Well, all right. Well,
in closing, I want to share one profound experience I had.
Yeah.
That may be the most remarkable experience of my life. Since I was very young, 6 years old or 7 or something, I have had one of my reoccurring dreams I've had that has stayed with me my entire life to this time. I'm 51, though much less frequently. It used to be like 4 times a year. Now it's like once a year. Is the peak across from Flag Rock, which is called Hawk Mountain, is what I was told.
There's no really?
Trails up there. Yeah, it's above the hill cabins.
Yeah, well, of course.
Right. And I have had this dream where I'm hiking up and it gets very steep on top and I'm struggling to get to the peak. And there's this moment where I just make it and there's these beautiful fields, these oak trees over and over and over again. Last year when I was there hiking, I was looking from the ridge trail, I was looking across at these impossibly steep meadows with these oaks jutting out. And I was like, that is exactly the image from my dreams. And I'd never been up there. I've hiked all over. And I thought, wow, all these years I've had all these dreams. I've never thought to go there. I'm going there the next time. So I hiked up there this visit. And I had this fear, that it'd be anticlimactic because I've had this dream my whole life. And I was like, I'm going to go up there and it's just going to be a hike. But I'm not going to share what happened, but the opposite happened. I had the most far out experience of my life, and definitely one of them. And I will say this, everything I have seen and experienced in my dreams was what I saw and experienced. As I was going up, I'd end up in these positions that I'd been in my dream, and I ended up in oak groves that were been in my dream. I couldn't believe it. My mind did not know how to make sense of having time and space transcended like that. And I don't know. I'm not saying what it means, and I'm not going to say more about it, but it's just so far out to me. I had to share it.
Oh, well, I want to hear more about it, but that's pretty good. That's very interesting, and because that's a place you hadn't been.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing. There's no report I can hear from somebody about something they experienced that would. It might surprise me, but that I would go, oh, that's impossible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All that brings up. That reminds me of something from Mad Magazine, the early Mad Magazine. When I was in elementary school, the most fantastic thing coming out, when I was 5th and 6th grade, it was like such a marvelous revelation. Anyway, there was a guy on a soapbox going, I tell you, friends, There's nothing you can't do if you set your mind to it. And then a guy in the audience goes, oh, yeah? Did you ever try to strike a standard safety match on a wet bar of soap? All right. I have that in a song, incidentally.
Yeah, that's something that people often say, is that anybody can kind of do anything, but it's not really true. It's good
No,
to play to
rich
your
people
strengths.
tend to say that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the very, very wealthy couple I know, the guys from India, this is a very Indian type statement, talking about, the need to, like I get by on donations. I mean, there's other sources, but donations are extremely important. And he says, if it's meant to happen, it will happen. And I go, yeah, that's coming from someone who's got either a lot of money or got a really good situation.
Yeah, we definitely don't live in a fair world. If you choose to be a gardener or a violinist, you're going to struggle your whole life to survive. And if you want to be, a futures trader, you're probably going to do quite well. And it's just how it is.
Yeah, but, I've noticed people that have a real surplus of wealth don't tend to be happy. It tends to be, it's a burden.
Mm-hmm. I think about that with everything. I've had this practice recently where I look at people and I determine if I think I would want their life and or if they seem happier or if they seem in a good space. Because, life is hard and I have plenty of struggles and stresses. And I almost never meet anybody who I'd want to switch places with who seems happier than me, which is kind of a sad statement about society. But it's so then you start questioning, well, what is it that brings fulfillment and happiness, And I have a whole theory about this, and you can see certain types of people, but it tends to be people that are like craftspeople or farmers, people who have like a rhythm, that they can kind of get into, but yeah, most people do not seem very content, regardless of their circumstances.
Well, we have gotten off on a few tangents here, but your main point that was how much you respected and were inspired by the people at Tassajara and the practice and just how well it's going. And I thought, we ought to get that on a podcast.
Well, that is how I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was really noticeable. And I look forward to seeing it evolve in the coming years. And I hope they reopen guest season because I want to take a bunch of friends down there in the summer.
Yeah. Well, definitely should. The Becks, Anna Beck said it's in the contract. You have to keep the place open for guests. I don't know if it really was in the contract.
They could change it into a system where it's a permanent work period, where it's not as defined, and it's like you have to basically be a guest student, and people pay more to go there and work half the day or whatever and meditate, and that's the model. It might allow it to run easier. I don't know.
I think they're planning on allowing. I think they are allowing some guests, aren't they?
I heard not this season. It's all like workshops, but maybe next year. I don't think it's an ideological decision. I think it's a current survival.
That's
situation.
true. It didn't come about because of ideology or hard practice in. It came about because they couldn't staff it. Well, hey, Kelly, it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, thanks, Dad, for chatting. I'm glad you're doing a podcast. It's a good opportunity to catch up.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, catch you later, Dad.
Yeah. That was great. Thanks a lot. Yeah. You take care.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Well, thanks a lot, Kelly Chadwick. Very, very good. Quite fascinating. Really enjoyed it. Well, man, maybe you'll have something new to say next year when you go there. That's pretty good. Oh, one thing I want to add, I had to go back and add this, because Kelly and I talked about the guest season and about, how there really wasn't a guest season anymore. And, I said something about, or I've always felt it was very important we continued the guest season in some form, especially for local people. Now, right here in our home, staying as our guest is Mako, who is the abbot of one of the co-abbots of the San Francisco Zen Center, stationed at the city center, but she's been spending a lot of time at Tassajara as, abiding teacher. I don't know what they call it. They might not have, I think she was saying they haven't worked out the wording for it. Anyway, and of course she knows a lot about what's happening there. She says that local people can go there. I don't know, there's probably some rules or whatever, but that was a great relief for me to hear. Another thing she emphasized was how very, very few people Tassajara got down to because of COVID. And I didn't realize how few the numbers were. I would say, well, we used to run it with your... No, nothing like that. Well, the Becks used to run it with, like 8 people and stuff. Actually, that's... she said they actually got down to 5. That is very hard to believe. Wow. But anyway, everything's working fine now. Zen Center, the people at Zen Center have figured out, how to adjust to changing times. I really salute them. Anyway, people are aware of the importance of allowing guests to come in, but, it has to be done in a way that works. Okay, thanks a lot. Take care, and this has been a Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC, Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from sleepy Sanur with Doggy Bandita, Feline Manis, and dear lovely Katrinka. And we're wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.